I'm so excited that I put together this lovely, lovely group of veterinarians that are willing to give up their time so freely. And so tonight we have with us Dr. Chris Besant. Hi, Dr. Besant. How are you?
Great, thank you.
So we were having a little chat before we came on live for you guys. We haven't seen each other since a Chicago show, and I had Dr. Besant on the show, and we talked about dilated cardiomyopathy, and I got to learn so much. And so I'm just so excited that you're going to come back on and be part of this fabulous group of veterinarians that I put together for this show, and
Yeah,
hope that
thank
people learn just how incredible you are. So I know I've talked
you.
about you a lot, but can you just kind of let everybody know you're in Wisconsin, but tell us a little bit about your background and how you got
Yeah,
into doing herbs and nutrition and stuff.
yeah. I'm a holistic veterinarian, so I've been a veterinarian for, gosh, 30 some years. And um, my journey as a veterinarian really kind of came from trying to find answers for every client that came my way, every patient. And so in the beginning, I had all these patients that came to me with chiropractic problems, spinal pain and neck pain. And so I went and did the best training available in the world in veterinary chiropractic. And then when I was there were all these veterinarians that are like, oh, you should use stomach 36 and Ziziphus and Buporum. And I thought, wow, I guess I also need to learn acupuncture. So I took the course in acupuncture, and at that time thought I'm a veterinarian, so putting needles in the right spot was fine, but I never want to know about herbs. I don't want to go on a botanical walk. I don't want to describe different species of herbs. But unfortunately, in Chinese medicine, that's one of the three pillars. So it's food, acupuncture, and herbs. And so so I had to learn herbs, and that was very complex and took years and years, and you're never done studying herbs. And so that led me into acupuncture and into herbs and to food energetics. And so as a veterinarian, I was a holistic veterinarian treating patients with chiropractic and acupuncture and herbs and discussing food therapy and adding nutraceuticals in. And then I also went and did a 4-year training for acupuncture and herbs for people.
Oh,
So,
wow.
kind of looking at the last animal out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the really fun part about it was um, I wanted to see if there was a difference between veterinary acupuncture, veterinary Chinese medicine, and human Chinese medicine. And it was really fascinating because there's a number of things that dogs do that they can't describe why they do it, but it fits perfectly with what we see in people. So in people, when they age and their kidney chi starts to go down, they get ringing in the ears. And if they hold their ears, the ringing goes away. Well, old dogs will tend to like push their head up against things, particularly like couches, stuff like that. And they have kidney chi deficiency.
Oh, wow.
So there's some things that we can't ask the pet directly, do you have ringing in your ears? But everything that fit for human fits perfectly for animals as well. So it allowed me to um, expand my Chinese medicine for animals as well.
Yeah.
So
That's
then from there, I practiced for many more years in veterinary medicine and just saw lots of patients looking at it from a holistic viewpoint. And then I thought, why aren't more people using Chinese herbs? And so we developed Herbsmith to be able to get it out to great retailers and out to more people. And so that's where Herbsmith was born. And then as a veterinarian, I saw that animals who ate well, healed well, and lived well. And if the average person would feed raw, that would be great, but most people won't because of the ick factor. So that's where freeze dried came in. And freeze dried was the closest thing to a raw food diet without the ick factor and in a shelf stable, scoopable way Because I
Right.
asked the question as a veterinarian, why did we all buy into this idea that kibble is great? Well, because it's inexpensive and it's easy. And so could we do that? Could we simulate close to that with real food? And freeze dried was the way to do it. So that's where I really got into Wisconsin freeze dried that makes the Simple Food Project. And that's how we developed the Simple Food Project as well. So that is my life history.
I think there's probably more. I'm gonna guess there's some other stuff like children
There's
and
a lot of
family.
others, but that was the general path.
That's the general path. You know, I have to say, when I pulled kibble off my shelf, which a lot of people know I did it and couldn't believe I was going to do it as a retailer, it could have hurt me very badly.
Yeah.
There were moments where I thought, oh, this is it. I'm ruining my business right here with one quick little, I'm not going to do it anymore. And so I was desperately looking for, there has to be something that will serve the people who need that feeling of pouring something into a bowl or scooping it into a bowl, that easy, for the mom who is like got 12 kids, maybe, there's so many reasons, right?
Right.
And I thought, oh no, freeze dried was available. Don't get me wrong. There was freeze dried food available, but there wasn't that scoopable freeze dried that you just pour. It was ones you had to break up. And I'm not saying those are necessarily bad, but I had to make it so basic. Like you just, instead of this bag, you're going to do this bag. And it really, really worked. It really, really worked. And it did, it people started to notice the difference in their animals, and they really didn't have to do much change. The price point wasn't much different. And you got so much more out of it. And so it just ended up being, wow, so many people were like, I can't believe I didn't do that longer. And then that got them on that road, right? Where now they're really starting to go, okay, I get it. And they started adding in other things and little things and stuff like that. And then it just kind of opened up their mind. So I was so thankful when I met you guys. Well, actually, yeah, when I met you, I just remember, I think it was Sarah that came over and she said hi first. I was like, oh yeah, let's do this. And so thankful.
I think it makes such a difference, that it's that foundation of health. And I like everybody, you're walking down the grocery store aisle, and if you go down the pet food aisle, you see this kibble that has beautiful pictures of vibrant salmon and sweet potatoes and cranberries. And you think, wow, this is fabulous. Why do I need to go anyplace else?
Yeah.
Because it's not true. It's false advertising.
Yeah.
And nobody can appreciate that is really true. Like I don't think the average consumer believes that they can just falsely advertise like that.
Yeah.
They do.
It's exactly right. When I talk to people too, I'm like, that's not what's in that bag of food. I'm sorry that we're allowed to get away with it, but that's not what your pet is eating. And you're right. And so it's so great to see, like, in your product, the actual cranberries and the actual, the meat.
Green beans. And you actually see the organ meat. And that was really important because it's all about the ingredients. I mean, if you take all of everything about nutrition, and it goes back to the basic ingredients that you're using. And freeze drying is just a process. So when somebody goes, oh, freeze dried, that's really good, doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. Right. Because you could still use crappy ingredients.
Sure.
So it's really about the quality of the ingredients that go into every single batch. Yeah. And so is it high quality USDA inspected meats? Is it fresh, healthy, wholesome organs? Is it organic fruits and vegetables? Is it species appropriate in the right amounts as well? But it all comes down to the ingredients. And that's why on Simple Food Project, we literally show you a platter of the food that goes into that bag. So you literally see it. And I think that's what really needs to happen, because if you took kibble and they showed you this platter of brown ick and it smells horrible,
I know.
And would you think it's the same as what you see on the package? You wouldn't.
No,
And
of course not.
so it's all to the ingredients, and every single ingredient that pet takes in needs to nourish their body, and not to just survive, but to actually live a vibrant, healthy life, which, I'm speaking to the choir, or preaching to the choir.
No, not always. Not always. I mean, we're still educating. We're still trying to get people, sometimes we get people that are watching in the background and they just want to hear us kind of communicate and talk. They don't ask a lot of questions. But later, I always find it's always like being at a live show, right? And you get to the Q&A and you say, are there any questions? And everybody kind of like, maybe they don't ask a lot of questions. And then when you walk off stage and you're in the bathroom, they're like, can I ask you a question?
That is so true.
Yeah, I get that a lot on this show. Like, I'll get emails later and I'll get a phone call later. I saw you last night and I was wondering if you could, this is the one, guys, don't do this. Could you call Dr. Bissett and ask her? You gotta ask her questions now. Like,
Yeah.
we can save them for later, though. If you do think of something later, for those of you that are listening, I don't want to discourage you. If you think of one later, you can email me, but I can't. She is so busy and is so gracious with her time. I don't want to call her and ask her another question, but we certainly can. If you email me questions, we certainly can ask those questions later for a different time. We do these, next time she comes on or something. So, but I do see that a lot with people calling me later.
I think that's really the fabulous part about holistic medicine is almost everything that can be treated with pharmaceuticals can be treated with holistic medicine. So either food therapy or nutraceuticals or herbs or homeopathy or just about anything can absolutely be treated with holistic medicine. It might take a little longer and be a little slower, but it's solid and resolving the issue versus just suppressing the symptoms.
Suppressing it,
because I'm a licensed veterinarian, so I can use all the pharmaceuticals, I can do surgery, I can do all of those things, but I choose to do things that are more gentle persuasions in the right way to develop a solid foundation of health. And then the beauty is that when those dogs do need surgery or do need pharmaceuticals, thank God we have them, and they will heal better and they'll have less side effects from the pharmaceuticals because they're in a stronger nutritional base. So it's really about being proactive every single day. You do it for yourself and you're being proactive for your pets as well. And thank God you have your traditional veterinarian that's there when you need them. But I think there's so many fabulous things that we can do before it gets to that point.
Yeah. So, hi, Sandra. So Sandra is wondering where you're located, but before, you could tell her, but I want to lead into that because I know that you do consultations. So a lot of people come on and they think, oh, well, she's not in my location. And so I delete and they don't want to listen. But I got to tell you guys, a lot of the people that I put on this show, a lot of the veterinarians that are on the show, unfortunately, are not, all in one group area. They're kind of spread out all over the country, but they all do consultations where a lot of times they work with your veterinarian. And so I'm going to let you kind of talk to them a little bit about how that would work, and you can let them know where you are.
Yeah. So my practice was in southeastern Wisconsin, and so that's where I live now. I don't practice right now, so I primarily manage Herbsmith and the Simple Food Project and Wisconsin Freeze Dried. But I do these really great quizzes. It's called Curate the Bowl, completely free to you. And you fill out the information and tell me all about your pet. And then what I do is I literally look at them every single day and kind of look at it from a holistic perspective. So what things would I change with the food that you're feeding to your pet? What things would I add as far as supplements go? There are times that I'll say, you need to find a veterinary chiropractor because that St. Bernard that is viciously attacking her tail every day is a kind of a tingly nerve sensation, and chiropractic and acupuncture could fix it. So then we will, and our team will get you hooked up with the right people. So we'll get you to the right websites that'll find a veterinarian that in your area that can help with it. And then you're absolutely right, Carrie. I do a lot of consultations with the owner's veterinarian. So if the veterinarian is not skilled in the use of Chinese herbs, but there's one herb that would just be perfect for that issue, I'm more than happy to talk to that veterinarian and present it from a Western perspective. So let's say, for example, a dog that has dry eye and not enough tears. There's some really great herbal formulas that treat that. And what I can give to the veterinarian is, here's the Western science behind why these herbs do what they do. And then here's the Chinese medicine behind why these herbs do what they do. The other really cool part to the Curate the Bowl is I'm looking at that quiz and also looking at all the pharmaceuticals you're using and making sure that everything intermeshes. That if you have a dog that has a heart condition and you're on a lot of heart supplements, are these other ones going to complement? Absolutely. So it's really it's a great service for people to help you, kind of guide you through things. And then rarely there's times where it's, beyond what I can do, and that I would send you to the right practitioner that could help you.
Yeah. And I think that's important for people to know, because not all veterinarians are willing to work with the vets that I recommend.
Yep.
So that's kind of number one. We have to have, your veterinarian has to be willing to, for lack of a better word, put the ego down for a little bit and let other people. I think that's the best. I think human doctors should be doing that. I think attorneys should be doing that. I think anybody who's trying to solve a problem should take a group of people together and solve the problem, especially with our animals who aren't speaking to us. Because just like you said in the beginning of the show, why are they scratching their ears? Are they getting a ringing in the ears? What's happening? Is something happening that they can't tell us? So why not use 2-3 people at a time?
Yeah. Yep.
So Sandra, you might be really interested in this, and you as well, Dr. Bissett. Julianne Lee is going to be doing a talk at the event we have coming up in October. And what she's going to be talking about is how to talk to your traditional veterinarian about what you want to do that's holistic, and how to kind of mesh them together without offending your conventional veterinarian. And so we need that, right? Do you come up against that? Do you struggle with that if you're working with a veterinarian?
I guess I would say I don't really struggle with that very much.
Oh, good.
Because I try to put it into scientific terms.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that Chinese medicine and herbs and nutraceuticals, herbs, for example, you can look at it from a Chinese perspective, which is very naturistic and describes wind and heat, but you can take those exact same herbs and put it into the Western perspective. So anti-inflammatory, decreases anxiety, changes the neuron firing of the brain. So I can kind of get when somebody's doesn't like the fluffiness of Chinese medicine, which I love. And but yet if I use words like COX-2, COX-1 enzyme degradation, that veterinarian was like, oh, that is scientific. and is a little more open to it. But I would also say that what you're doing here is a great example of it. The grassroots effort of this just makes sense. It just makes sense that you can fix a lot of things with diet. You can fix a lot of things with behavior management. You can fix so many things by making sure that they're having all the right nutrients that they need every day in their bowl. I think there's so much of that it just makes such great sense. And there's a lot of veterinarians that are starting to see that as well.
Yeah. That's got to be exciting when you start seeing. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Have you ever worked with had a client call you and say, oh, I really want to use your herbs and I really want to use some acupuncture, but my conventional vet doesn't necessarily believe it. Have you ever got on that phone call, done the scientific stuff, done, and then, mention the scientific stuff, then use the herbs, had it work, and then have a veterinarian go, I should start to learn something. Has that ever happened?
Absolutely. All the time.
That
All
is
the time.
awesome. That
Yeah.
is awesome.
And I think that, like for me, that was my journey too.
Yeah.
I gave you the quick outline in the beginning, but for the chiropractic, I had a human chiropractor, Julie Kaufman, who is a human chiropractor, but also has been adjusting animals forever, came to my area and she showed me it. And I went, oh, that's fascinating. I need to know about that. And then, whether it's the universe or God, but all these cases kept coming to me with back pain and nerve pain and kind of gently saying, come on, you need to learn this. And then with the acupuncture, I kept getting cases where I couldn't fix it, which is frustrating. And I had a horse that had a really severe nerve pain in one area, and an acupuncturist came out and in one treatment completely resolved it.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, I need to know that. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more people that are open to it. And I think the more we discuss it and look at it as a very logical thing, it's not this kind of new age woohoo sort of thing. It's just common sense and logical scientific physiology that more people are interested in it. So I haven't had the resistance that you would think.
That's really good.
At least not lately. In the very beginning, yes. In the very beginning, there was definitely, I was the witch doctor for a while.
Oh my God.
But then the beauty is the other veterinarians kept seeing that I was fixing their cases. And then they went, ooh, she's doing something right.
At least that's I've always said even no matter what kind of veterinarian you have, all vets start with the idea that they want to heal and help animals. And that's at the basic level. Something happens a little bit in vet school. I can't tell you what it is because I didn't go through vet school, but something happens there and it gets all mussed up and things happen. And then veterinarians come out and they're very, in my opinion, at least the veterinarians my experience has been very tunnel visioned on this is how you do it. And it's about suppressing instead of healing and all this stuff happens. But one of the things I wanted to know, I know in the beginning you said that you didn't want to go learn about herbs. And I want to take you back there for a minute because I know there's people listening that are thinking, oh, herbs, that just seems like I gotta have tea. What was it that made you not want to? Because maybe it's the same as what makes other people not want to start using herbs for their dogs. What was it that made you think, I just don't want to learn that? I know you're like, great, I don't know. And it could be as simple as I didn't want to go outside and pick bushes. I don't know. Some people don't want to be outside
I would say that I definitely had that feeling of it's a tea, so is it really going to help? It's not, it's a spice. It's not really, is it powerful enough? Or do I want to waste my time with something that's not strong enough to make a difference? So that was definitely probably in the back of my mind. And then the other is I was very, very focused on the animal body and less about nature. Less about
did I hit a nerve?
Plants and trees and grasses as I was about the body and how does the kidney work and how does the liver work. But that was so naive and ignorant. And as I opened my mind and saw that the body is just a reflection of what's going on outside and what happens in nature affects our bodies and vice versa, my mind opened up to the whole idea. And then it was off to the races. But I think that was that journey. But yeah. And I
Yep.
would say that there are herbs that are super, super gentle, like chamomile tea. It's
Hmm.
great to have you go to sleep. I mean, it's just wonderful, but it's super gentle. But there are also some herbs that are very, very strong. And they are not in over the counter formulas. They're by prescription only among physicians or veterinarians. So the gamut of herbs runs really broad, from very gentle to very aggressive as well. And if you think about it, where do a lot of pharmaceuticals come from? They come from the world, they come from nature, they come from taking ginseng, for example, and trying to isolate one active ingredient and then put it into a pill so that you eat X amount of it. But that
Well,
doesn't really work
isn't that
because there's
also how they,
active and inactive ingredients.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but isn't that also so that they could patent it, like aspirin,
100%. Yep.
right? So it was really, I remember the first time I learned that aspirin was willow bark.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I was like, oh my gosh, like it's basically just willow bark, but now it has the Bayer stamp on it. They were able to patent it and make money off of it. And I
100%.
remember thinking, wow, and aspirin's pretty powerful. Like you can, you could take an aspirin, and so you could also go to the store and get willow bark, which is what I do now. Um,
100%. And
yeah,
yours is smarter because the willow bark has the inactives and the actives together. So it dampens any of the negative side effects of that one really strong active ingredient, which is salicylic acid. So there's all the other inactives that help to buffer that. So you don't get all the GI issues and kidney issues that you can get with, and platelet issues that you can get with chronic aspirin. So there's definitely a place for strong pharmaceuticals, but the root of it is it came from herbs.
yeah, it's crazy. But I'm so glad that you said that you didn't, that was one of the things you thought, oh, that's never going to be strong enough. I'm going to be wasting my time and I'm going to have to, because I know that was my thought. And I know for a fact that is the thought of most people. And you hit the nail right on the head with that. So for those of you who are listening, I have witnessed herbs do really great things. I know that Dr. Bissett has. Tell us what is, can you share any like herb stories of, I know you probably got a million of them and I'm
So
asking you to
many.
pull some out, but
Yeah.
maybe share a story with us about some herbs that have made a difference.
There was there's so many stories, but one in particular kind of stands out to me all the time. And her name was Emma. And Emma was this wonderful golden retriever, just the sweetest, kindest dog. And she had chronic IBD, so irritable bowel syndrome. So she vomited and she had diarrhea, and if she ate anything unusual, she would start getting the gurgly guts, and she was thin because then she didn't want to eat anything. And this amazingly wonderful owner did everything.
I
So
love
she
those guys, those guys that do that.
did
Anything. What
right.
do I do? I love it.
They x-rayed everything. They did barium studies. They took biopsies. They did everything. And Western medicine, the only thing that they could do for that dog is give her steroids, which made her even more sick. So then she gained weight and she was restless and she was irritable. And it was terrible. So she came to me, of course, as the last ditch effort. And we started her on a combination of Chinese herbs that's called Xiao Yao San. So it's a combination of Chinese herbs that are all about decreasing heat and inflammation in the GI tract. She went on that herb and that combination of herbs and never looked back. And every single day it was additive and additive and additive. And within 3 months, she was a completely different dog. She
Oh,
was back to a normal golden retriever that could eat anything, that maintained healthy stool and normal gut motility. And she was just fabulous. And she lived on those. She got those herbs for the rest of her life, and it
yeah,
was fine.
yeah.
And it wasn't very expensive. It was like $30 a month. Right now, we sell that same formula called GastroCare via Herbsmith, and it was a miracle,
Yeah.
in my opinion. I mean, it changed the trajectory of that pet's life. And that's what I see all the time happening with herbs. But I would qualify that with wouldn't give a herb and expect that it's going to be immediately better the next day, like a pharmaceutical would be. But it's a gradual, every single day movement to normal. And the fortunate part for Emma is her owner is amazing, and she watched her like a hawk. And she saw that every day the gurgling was less and the stool was better. And slowly but surely, and this woman didn't come to me because she was all holistic and all only wanted to do it that way. She was just a wonderful pet parent that wanted her fabulous dog Emma to be happy and healthy and vibrant. And I was very fortunate to be able to combine all the things that I learned to get this formula for her to help change the trajectory of her life.
Yeah.
So I would say that I know that we all had that preconceived idea that herbs are not powerful, but they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they can really make a huge difference. There's amazing herbs for seizures that definitely lower the seizure threshold, that are dramatic, that you can really use with every other types of seizure medication.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
it is. It
great.
is. It was. I know.
Practicing without it.
Practicing without it, you never, right?
Yeah.
I think that that's what, when people, like you said, she didn't come to you necessarily saying, I only want to do holistic. And I actually think that's a dangerous thing for people to do. So I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I think what people really want when they go to a holistic veterinarian, or if they don't know, they should know, really what you're getting is a bigger toolbox.
Yes, 100%.
Right? So we've talked about that. You're just getting somebody with a bigger toolbox. And if you have a bigger toolbox, you're more likely to use the right thing. If I only have one steroid over here, then I give the steroid. And that, and just like Dr. Bissett said, she could have given steroids. She knows how to do that. She knows how to do surgery. She knows how to do all of those things. Right. She just chooses to try something that is less intrusive, right? Because that's where people don't understand. Sure, that drug might work really quick. And we really want it quick because that's how we, especially now with all our cell phones, we want instant gratification. But it often leads to us paying. I think I've seen that instant gratification that people do. And then before you know it, they're at the vet every month and they've got another problem. And I'm like, wow, that wasn't very convenient. Now you're on this road to nowheresville. And
that kind of goes back to that whole pyramid of health as well, that food is the foundation of health. Yeah. And to me, herbs are just kind of a step up above food. And we were talking before about the Curate the Bowl and how, we've now done almost 2,000 Curate the Bowls, which these quizzes for people. And it's amazingly fabulous. And the one thing that you can see over and over again is if the pet parent is not feeding good food, you almost immediately can see that they're going to either have skin allergies or they're going to have digestive issues.
Yes.
And it just makes sense that just changing their food from the kibble that has the foundation of that is poor ingredients, just changing their food can make such a profound difference.
Yeah.
And I would put that in that same category of food doesn't make a change overnight, but it doesn't take quite as long as you'd expect. And I'm sure you've seen that in your store. That I was amazed when I first started really looking at food as a treatment modality, how quickly it took effect. Mm-hmm. You can really see within a week the improvement of a pet from bad food to a good food. Can't you? I mean, it's dramatic.
Absolutely. And if we would pay attention even to our own bodies, right? We pay attention to our own body. Yeah. If you're eating junk food for, weeks on end and with nothing, you're going to feel crappy. And then if you eat well for even 2 days, you're like, wow, I feel a lot better. I should have probably stopped eating that stuff. The same thing happens in our animals. We see it
Right.
definitely, without a doubt. I think people are surprised to hear someone like yourself say, when we go back to Emma, the golden retriever, um, that a dog could have IBD this severe. And I wanted to make sure I said, this is not this. I see this all the time. Dogs who have chronic
I
IBD
agree.
their entire lives. It's so bad that some of my clients will come in with their dogs, and we do grooming and boarding and daycare. And so when the dogs leave from those places in the back, we always want to give them a treat. And I have seen people practically knock down my counter when I say, can he have a treat? And no, my God, no, because they know the IBD is so bad that even the slightest little thing, and that dog's going to be up all night with diarrhea.
Right.
And it's just awful to think, because people ask me all the time, what do I feed my dogs? And I'm all, oh man, I couldn't even begin to tell you the amount of different foods my dogs eat. I mean,
Right.
they eat such a variety, and it's always different, and it changes constantly, and they never have bowel problems. And
Yeah, that was Karen Becker's. Remember, you know Dr. Karen
Yeah.
Becker.
Yeah.
That was her thing years and years ago. Develop guts of steel.
yeah,
Because dogs are scavengers. They
Yeah.
should be eating junk. Not junk, but they should be eating a whole variety
right,
of different protein sources, not just one, a whole variety of it.
Yeah.
And to me personally, I think that there's so much bad chemicals, bad single ingredients in kibble. And so when people will say to me that their dog cannot tolerate any meat at all, I go, oh, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at their teeth. They're carnivores. I say that they can't tolerate any of the garbage or the chemicals or the chemicals that are generated in the process of making kibble.
right,
That's what they can't tolerate. It's not that they can't, if you fed that animal healthy, wholesome chicken that was free in your yard, and that dog ate that, they would be very healthy. But if you fed them chicken scraps that were rendered meat that came from a massive, intensive chicken production farm, the quality of that meat and the chemicals that are in that meat and the stress that that bird was going through prior to being slaughtered is now in that meat. And so now our dogs are going to eat that and they're going to get sick from it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it just goes back to the basic ingredient that goes into that food.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we've really gotten into that. Like a big thing from my thought process for simple food is it's clean.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's clean, wholesome, healthy ingredients.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be. And we don't really identify all these other chemicals like glyphosate or putrescin or AGEs that are in kibble. We don't see that, but it is.
Yeah. No, it's everywhere. But it's difficult now. I know we briefly talked on this a little bit because, I'm guilty of this. I am absolutely guilty of saying whole fresh foods. I say it constantly, whole fresh foods. I want to see the organ meat. I want to see this. But what's happening is, and this is what we talked about earlier, is we're having a shift into these subscription type foods that are confusing to people because we're over here trying for years. Well, some of us for a really long time have been trying to speak up and say no kibble. And that was real easy to do. Just don't feed kibble. But then, and I would say whole fresh foods, whole fresh foods. But then we got all of these other foods that came on the market. And my problem, I don't know about you, and if you've noticed this, is that now people think, oh, so long as it's whole and fresh, so long as it's not kibble, then therefore it must be good for my dog. Give you an example of like some of the foods at the grocery store. fresh pet is one of them, right? So that's not actually meat. So it's a processed meat, but it looks like it looks like food.
Yeah.
What are we
Yeah.
going to do about that? Like how do we what's the language we need to use? Because I'm struggling with it. I don't know what the language is, because they stole away our whole fresh food. Like they stole it, and it's now looking like that. And what do you think the
Right.
problem is with that stuff? Not just that company, but in general, like the
Right. I think it goes back to AFCO. It goes back to AFCO and to the FDA and to true transparency
yeah,
of
agreed.
the manipulation of ingredient decks to make it seem what it isn't needs to end.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. And should companies give exact proportions of exact ingredients? They probably should. And
Why not?
so we don't have to guess. So when we look at an ingredient deck and chicken's first, but then it's gluten meal and corn meal and byproduct meal and blah, 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 it's all a numbers game as to what that number one ingredient is. And then of course the packaging is beautiful. So it's a little bit more in the right direction, but it's still not 100%. And I don't know how to overcome that, because I agree with you. I look at it as well and say, is this true or is it not true? And the funny thing is that people are so questioning of things that they question us as well, and which is great, because I'm thrilled and I can say, this is the platter of food that went into your food.
Yeah.
So you can literally see it as to what it was before it was made into a very scoopable form for your pet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it is. It's frustrating.
You're
And
right. It does. It comes down to who we're supposed to trust somebody, right? Because we all don't have time to constantly follow around every single company and make sure that they're, in a perfect world, people would do the right thing.
Right.
In a perfect world, people wouldn't get away with things because they can, and that all of the food that is on the front of the bag is actually in the back of your bag. So you're absolutely right when you say it comes down to AFCO and not allowing that to happen. So yes. I think that's where we need to start getting some changes done, because otherwise like the whole feed grade, food grade, right? Like just that alone would be nice if you knew exactly what kind of meat. And then how about the carbohydrate not being on our food? Doesn't 100%. Even list it.
And the problem is that regulators and big pet food are way too close. They're just way too close. And regulators, FDA should not be looking to big pet food for their research. Right. And big pet food should not be so cozy with the FDA and with AFCO. And you can scream all you want, but as I see it, that is the truth. And it's kind of like the foxes guarding the hen house. And until that, using veterinary terms, until that changes, it's really up to us as pet parents to have to do our research or find somebody like you. I mean, you're the advocate for the animal. I mean, that's what I love about independent pet retailers. They're the ones that are doing the solid science, the solid research, and figuring out what each brand does and what they use in each one of their foods, so that you can wholeheartedly be an ambassador for that food, because it's of the highest quality. So your pet parent can trust you and not have to do all the research on their own, because because I think it's almost impossible.
It's hard. It's hard for me. I am constantly, and then a company will get sold and bought out. And then I have to be like, okay, this company got bought out. Am I going to trust this person who bought this company? Am I going to, no. And I've pulled a lot of stuff off my shelf when they get bought out, and
Right.
it requires a lot of work. So it is really hard for a pet parent to do all of that. And they don't like when I pull something off my shelf. Trust me, all hell breaks loose.
And the problem is that if you use crappy ingredients, you've got a lot of extra money to spend on marketing and promotions and
Yep.
giving away free food and lots of discounts. And you've got tons of money to do all of those other things. But when you're doing it right and you're using real food, real organic ingredients, real organ meat, that costs money.
Yeah.
So you have less money to do advertising campaigns and propaganda and all the rest of it that goes into it. And so how do you fight up against that? The way the FDA should be the ones doing it.
You're right. The FDA should absolutely be the ones. And speaking about the FDA, I want to just because it's been a long time, and we talked about this before we went live. It's been a really long time since we had the situation with DCM come up. And that's what we had talked about on the podcast. If you haven't listened to Dr. Bissett's podcast that I did with her a few years ago, I encourage you to, because we certainly aren't going to be able to cover everything right now. But I kind of wanted to do a little follow up on that podcast with you because it seems like it's resurfacing again. So how are you feeling about, so DCM, maybe you just explain it real quick what that is for everybody to understand.
Yeah, it's dilated cardiomyopathy. So the heart muscle of a dog gets weaker. And so instead of being tight and toned, it becomes flabbier and flabbier. And then it can't contract fully. And then you start to get fluid backing up into the lungs and into the abdomen. And then pets start coughing. And with dietary dilated cardiomyopathy, if you add taurine to their diet, the heart becomes stronger again. And so there was a group of veterinarians, cardiologists, who saw that they were seeing a lot of DCM in large breed dogs, but in all breeds that were associated with grain-free diets. And so they alerted the FDA and said, we think there could be a correlation here. And they launched an investigation into it. And there was a lot of debate back and forth. And now it's kind of simmered down and a bit on the back burner. And now there's studies out saying that there's not a correlation. And the FDA, I don't think, has really come out and given us anything definitive on what was it. Was it when you're feeding? And the way I looked at it as a holistic veterinarian is, we know that dogs are scavenger carnivores. So species appropriate should mean they eat a lot of meat and organs and smaller amounts of vegetables and even smaller amounts of fruits. So that their food pyramid is the inverse of a human. And so when big pet food was feeding a lot of high grain diets, so corn and soy and wheat, they felt that if they cooked those grains, that it made it more bioavailable to the carnivore, so that protein would be equal to animal-based protein. And so as we saw that carnivores are carnivores, or dogs are carnivores, and they need a higher meat diet, the trend went away from high grain diets and went to grain-free. And it was just the pendulum swung. So now grain-free was still high carbohydrate, but instead of corn and soy and wheat, it became peas, legumes, lentils, but lots and lots and lots of peas. And then this dilated cardiomyopathy started to become more seen than it was before. So for me, I said that it was ultimately neither one was good. So high grain diets were not good because they're not goats, they're carnivores. Look at their teeth. And high legume diets are not good either. That's high carbohydrate. They need a high meat diet. Unfortunately, a high meat diet is more expensive. And so the pet food companies were trying to be able to feed lots of dogs for the least amount possible, which would have been one of those two. When the DCM came around, unfortunately, veterinarians, the pendulum swung back again, and veterinarians said, see, we need grains in their diet. And that was not how I interpreted it. I interpreted it as, see, they need more meat and organ. They should be getting their protein from an animal base, not from a plant base. So unfortunately, the veterinary community said that now we should go back to high grain diets, which to me was like taking pet food nutrition back 40 years.
Yep.
But veterinarians should be the experts on it. And then since then, it's really kind of died down. I felt personally that it might have been the glyphosate that's really high in grain-free diets, and that glyphosate, which is Roundup, the active ingredient in Roundup, is very cardiotoxic. And that would have been a big nut to crack. So what is your opinion on it?
Well, I didn't think the study that they were doing had enough dogs involved in it to
True.
really be something that I thought was going to be helpful. I am still seeing people really panicky about it. It's still in my area being brought up a lot. You're right. I just don't like a lot of carbohydrates. I'll help you right there in a second, Kayla. So for me, it was like, you're right. I just don't like the carbohydrates in their food. So I'm not going to sit there and say grain free or grain food, because I don't think either one of them, if it's going to be replaced with just a different carbohydrate. So for me, it was that way. What I tell people is, look, if you're concerned about it and your dog did better on a grain free food, so the grains weren't causing the allergies and the itching and the ear infections, just add some meat to that kibble.
Yeah.
That's where the taurine comes from anyway. And so that's what
100%.
I started telling people, because I do have some clients that have really large dogs and it can be really, really expensive to feed non-kibble diets. And I get it. You know, you got 4 Great Danes and it could be expensive. So I just said, look, because what are you going to do? Now you're going to go back on this grain food. Now your dog's licking his paws again. Now you're back on Apoquel. And so it goes it's just a mess, which all leads us back to, don't feed kibble.
Right. Feed a scavenger carnivore as
much as you can. I always want to say as much as you can, because I do understand, like I said,
right.
but kibble has its limits and we have to be aware of that. Kayla wants to know, do you have a checklist for what we should be looking for in a dog food?
That's a good one.
That one's hard. My checklist would be so long, we would have to do this in 12 years.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's such a great question. And
great question.
I would think it would be a very easy question, Caleb, because it should be easy. You know, you should be able to look at the ingredient deck and it should say chicken necks, chicken liver, chicken gizzards, sweet potato. It should be things that we understand. And it should be, for example, Simple Food Project, we tell you exactly. We tell you that it's 79% meats and organs and 10% veggies. And so we give you the exact proportions so you don't have to kind of guess. That's where kind of coming back into the FDA should be making it clear, forcing pet companies to be clear on what exactly is in their food.
Yeah.
I would say from the broadest perspective, anything that says a meal in it, any ingredient that says chicken meal or bone meal or meat and bone meal is bad. And anything that says meal in the ingredient deck means that it's a rendered product, meaning that a whole bunch of parts were all thrown together in a giant vat and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked, and then dehydrated. And now that is the chicken meal. It has the DNA of chicken in it. And so it can be called chicken meal. Meat and bone meal is a rendered product. So all of the things dumped into a big vat and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked, and then ground to and then dehydrated and ground to a powder. But that could have any number of species of protein in that. So number one, if you just eliminate anything that says meal on the ingredient deck, one that would immediately take you to the top 10% of the best pet foods out there. Because if you're not saying it's chicken meal or bone meal or lamb meal or salmon meal, then it means that it is real chicken, it is real salmon, it is real beef. That's your number one. So that would get you to the top. Unfortunately, that eliminates the majority of kibble because almost all kibble has that. And then I would also look at the top 5 ingredients in the ingredient deck and imagine that top 5 ingredients are about 20% each. And so if the top 5 ingredients, the first one is chicken, but then it's rice gluten or rice meal or corn gluten and soybeans and something else, then you can kind of extrapolate out that only really about 20% of that diet is actual animal-based protein. Unfortunately, that's the sort of kind of guess game that we need to do as consumers to figure out what it is. And I would stop looking at the pictures on the bag because I can guarantee you those pictures, if you have the DNA of chicken, then they can put that beautiful picture of chicken breast on the package, but it's not that at all. It's chicken parts that have been boiled down into a rendered chicken meal powder.
I giggle a little bit.
Poor Kayla, she's like, "Are you kidding me?"
No, well, I giggle. It's so hard because there's so many rules that I know we both follow. I bring in a lot of products into my store, and so I follow. My list is so long that it's really hard to get something in there. But I have to laugh when you said you could basically have the DNA of a chicken and you could put chicken on it. But it's not funny. She's not wrong. Like it's that bad. It's really that bad. And as Dr. Passett is talking about where the chicken gets ground down into that little meal, keep in mind they get to weigh it before that happens, which is why the chicken goes first. Yep. So it's all about weight. So when you do have a chicken meal, they weigh it before so it can be first, but then your rice and your potatoes and your corn gluten meals and all that other stuff actually could be less. So I think that's such a great answer. And you're right, because as soon as you take that meal out of a kibble, you do raise up really far up on that list. Right. There's still some work that has to be done, but that's an easy one.
And I think the word meal is just misleading.
Oh,
totally misleading, because when somebody goes chicken meal, well, the average consumer thinks it's like Kentucky Fried Chicken, and so we put a meal.
Yeah, it's a meal.
We don't think that meal means rotten garbage that's boiled, bits and parts and pieces that are thrown away that are boiled down to kill any bacteria in it, and then dry it out and make it into a powder. Nobody thinks that, because meal sounds good. Yeah. Because if they said it was rendered junk, and you read on your ingredient deck chicken junk, nobody would buy that. Yeah. So meal is just, that word should not be used. It's very misleading.
Yeah.
To the average consumer.
To help Kayla out. So that's what you want to eliminate. What is something you really want to see in the dog food?
Then my next step would be the proportions of animal protein to plant protein. So that unfortunately gets you back to ingredient decks. Um, and and about being species appropriate. So is it high carbohydrate? Dogs don't literally physiologically cannot digest a high amount of carbohydrates. So they don't have a lot of amylase or any amylase in their saliva, which is again an indication that they shouldn't be eating carbohydrates. Their pancreas tends to get overloaded when they have a high carbohydrate diet, and then they get a lot of pancreatitis. And so there's so many true physiologic facts that are apparent in the scavenger carnivore saying that you should not have a high carbohydrate diet. So that carbohydrates are a huge issue for pets. And we're just barely in the last couple of years have really talked about it.
Yeah.
But I think that is a huge part of it. It needs to have that food pyramid where the top is meats and organs, and then veggies, and then some fruits as natural carbohydrates, natural sugars, and try to minimize the amount of grains that are in their diet.
Yeah. It's interesting because legally, like you said, AFCO doesn't require them to put carbohydrates on the back of their bag. So most of them don't have it listed and never would. For me, the number one easy thing for me to look at, I won't even continue on, is if it doesn't have organ meat in it. Because I that's my first kind of, okay, they're putting organ meat in it, so they know something. And then, so it starts me on my path. But if I flip something over and I don't see organ meat, I don't know if that helps you, Kayla, because the checklist is awfully long, I think, for both of us when you really start. I couldn't believe how my list kept growing because as I would learn, and I'm sure there's stuff I couldn't even imagine they're doing. But my list kept growing, and I look back sometimes at some of the stuff that I thought made kibble good. Well, it doesn't have natural flavoring in it, I would say.
Right.
So, it's a learning curve. It really is learning for all of us, which is why I'm just so blessed to have
And
you.
even though I'm bashing kibble like bad, I'm being very honest about it. It does feed the world. So is it better that dogs get food than no food at all? Absolutely. So, but I think as we all learn more, the trend is definitely going towards healthier food and good, vibrant food for our pets. And we definitely see that happening in our lifetime, no question. And hopefully it just continues on that way so that we can feed the world with good, healthy, vibrant food rather than remnants of what's left over.
Right, right. Well, it has been just amazing to have you on here and talking and educating us and continuing to learn with you. I learned these are great tips. She says thank you very much. So I hope so. I'm here every Wednesday at 4:00. We might be changing it to 5:00 California time, Pacific Standard Time, because it's been hard for the West Coast to get on at this time, but I wanted to be fair because unfortunately most of the vets that I recommend, it's so weird. I don't know why. I just felt like California should have some good holistic veterinarians. I feel like we're holistic here. I mean, we have a Whole Foods, damn it. Like but then when I start to look for the vets, I'm like, oh my gosh, is California not holistic? I'm lost. So a lot of our vets are on the East Coast or in Wisconsin. And so we tried I didn't want you to be up till 10:00 at night.
Thank you.
But it's a little bit of a struggle. So for all of you guys that are listening, we might be changing this next, I guess we can call it seasons, because I go through 15. You guys sign up whenever you want to sign up, whenever you have time. And then I go through the 15. So when we're done with this, we might be changing it to 5:00 California time. So it won't be too late for you guys. So you might get the next one at that time. But I'm just so thankful. I'm sure you had just such a long work day, and then to still be educating people and still fighting for these animals to have the right to have good food and have access to herbs that are fresh and can help them heal is just such a blessing that you merged those two together. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Besant's company, she has two. It's Herb Smith and then the Simple Food Project. And they're both her, and we can trust everything that they're doing, but they're two different companies. So it's just, I have them both in my store, and I've just been so blessed to use them and see the healing I've actually seen in animals. It's just amazing. And so you're great. What's your favorite herb? And then I'm going to let you go.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's
okay. How about this? What's the prettiest herb?
Oh, passion flower.
That's harder.
Passion flower, I think, is the most
passion
beautiful.
Flower.
Yeah, that's so gorgeous.
It's a gorgeous. It's good. Yeah,
that is beautiful. Yes, yeah. There's so many fabulous herbs. There really are, and what's really fun is like everyone has a different aroma and texture, and
how fun.
It's living food for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to have you back on when we go through our rotations or whatever. For all of you guys listening, remember, you can, if later you get off here and you're like, oh my gosh, now I think I want to ask this question, you can email it to me. I'm sure you could probably email one to Dr. Besant. Maybe she can help you out if you're working with Herbsmith. We can ask it on the next show if you want it to be live, so that you can get more of an explanation. So you certainly can do that through my website. You can contact Dr. Besant. We have all of her information up there. Behind the scenes, you guys don't see, but it's Lori. And without her, I promise you, we would not be here. We would not be here if somebody wasn't behind the scenes. So I want to make sure I thank her. And I can't wait to see you guys all next week. So take care, everybody. Dr. Besant, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Sarah, thank you. I know you're there somewhere.
She's in the back.
Sarah is Dr. Besant's behind the scenes. So I guess we need to thank them both, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.